Police officers of Reddit, what are the best excuses people have given when they were pulled over? Story 1. Not sure what you're looking for. Best as in funniest? Or best as in most likely to avoid a ticket? There's no secret excuse that works every time. The best thing to do, if you actually did something wrong, is to accept that we caught you, be polite, apologize, and say it won't happen again. More often than not, at least with me, you'll just get a warning. One that comes to mind, and I truly felt sorry for him because I've been there, was a kid who was on his way home from work. He was going a little too fast down a residential road. I stopped him, and when I got up to the window, he was sweating bullets and squirming in his seat. He looked like he was in bad shape. I asked if everything was okay, and then he proceeded to let out a huge, wet fart that just seemed to never end. He followed that up with, "No, I must have eaten something bad at lunch. I need a washroom now." I told him to pull into the gas station down the street right away, and then he left. Not sure if he made it, but I felt bad. There's nothing worse or more uncomfortable than driving and having to shit like your life depends on it. Story 2. I was the one who got pulled over, but this actually worked for me. I was on the interstate, doing about 5 to 10 miles over the speed limit. Cars were whizzing past me like they were trying to achieve warp speed. Lights flash. I get pulled over. The officer says, "Do you know why I pulled you over?" I reply, "I was the only one driving slowly enough to catch." The policeman laughs himself red in the face, calls me a smartass, and sends me on my way without a ticket. Story 3. Not a police officer, but my excuse story fits here. My wife and I got married at 18 and had our first child at 19. When she was 37 weeks along with our first, just barely full term, I decided to travel to Jacksonville, Florida with some friends for a concert, about 3 hours away from home. She jokingly said, "You know I'm going to go into labor tonight, right?" We both laughed, and I left with my friends. Unfortunately, I forgot to bring my cell phone with me. After a fun night, I got home around 2 a.m. to find a note taped to the door that said, "Water broke. Having baby. Come to hospital." Laughing, I walked inside to find the apartment empty and the hospital bag gone. That's when I realized, oh shit, I'm going to miss the birth of my child. I quickly grabbed my phone and jumped in the car. My first thought was to call my parents to let them know. I have no idea why that was my first instinct. As I was yelling, "The baby is coming," to my half-asleep father, I failed to notice how fast I was going. Apparently, a police officer noticed I was doing 70 miles per hour in a 45 miles per hour zone at 2 in the morning. As the lights came on, I quickly realized what was happening. I pulled over and braced myself for the dreaded ticket. It's worth noting that I looked young for my age. At 19, I probably could have passed for 15. The officer approached the car and asked something along the lines of, "What the hell are you thinking, driving 70 in a 45? To which I replied, "My wife is in the hospital and in labor." He looked at me for a long moment, then said, "Your wife is in labor at the hospital? Huh, sure, buddy, what hospital?" After giving him the hospital information, he said, "I'm going to verify your little story. Sit tight." After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 5 minutes, he came back shaking his head and said, "She's only at 3 centimeters. You've got time. Slow the hell down." And with that, he let me go. I never got his name, but I'd love to thank that officer for saving me hundreds of dollars in tickets and possible jail time, so I could make it to my daughter's birth. Story 4. My own story. I was in the company car, a turbocharged Mini Cooper, doing about 110 miles per hour on the freeway like a teenage fuckwad. I got pulled over and immediately got yelled at. The cop dropped several F-bombs, telling me how stupid I was. He explained that if someone cut me off in that tiny car going 110 miles per hour, I would almost certainly die. Being the idiot I was, I hadn't really considered that, and I showed genuine remorse. He threatened to have the car towed and take me to jail. I was terrified. I would have definitely lost my job. He went back to his cruiser for a minute, then returned and said, "Lucky for you. I have an appointment in Provo, neighboring town, that I can't be late for, so I'm going to have to let you go." I have never been so relieved in my life. He reprimanded me a bit more and told me to stay off the freeway for the rest of the week as punishment, which I actually followed out of respect. Thinking back, I often wonder if he realized it was a company car, understood how badly this could have affected my employment, both present and future, and decided to cut my dumb ass a break. Either way, I'm eternally grateful for that cop's mercy. FYI, I still work at that same company, doing well. I drive much more safely now. Story 5. A friend of mine was driving home late at night, going about 115 kilometers per hour in a 100 zone, with a pair of baby twins sleeping in the back seat. The police pulled us over for speeding, but before the cop walked up to the car, my friend gave each of the twins a small pinch to wake them up and get them crying. When the officer got to the window, she was immediately hit with the screaming noise of the two little twins. My friend said, "Sorry I was speeding. I have to get these little guys home before they drive me crazy." The officer just said, "Okay, but be safe and keep the speed down." And we were on our way. The kids fell asleep again 5 minutes later. Story 6. Not a police officer, but I do have a story. When I was younger, I bought this little stuffed monkey puppet from the toy store with my mom. It was adorable, and inside there was a little button that made squeaky noises when you squeezed it. One day, I was playing with it in the front seat while my mom was driving home, really getting into it, making it dance all around and squeak for my mom while she laughed hysterically. Unfortunately, she picked the wrong time to not be watching her speed, and we got pulled over. A policewoman walked up as my mom rolled down the window, still giggling. "Do you know how fast you were going?" My mother, unable to help herself, said, "I'm so sorry, officer. The monkey made me do it." At the same time, I slowly tried to take my hand off the button, which resulted in a long, loud squeak from the monkey toy I was holding sheepishly in the passenger seat. The policewoman cracked up, said it was one of the best excuses she'd ever heard, and let us off with a warning. Story 7. Not an officer, but true story, and it wasn't an excuse. I was 18, new to driving, and on my way back from a girl's house at 1 a.m. An officer pulled me over and asked for my license and registration. He looked them over, then asked, "Son, did you know you were driving without your headlights on and a bit erratically? Have you had any alcohol?" I had a flushed face. I said, "No, sir, I didn't know my headlights were off. I'm new to driving this car and driving, sir. I haven't had any alcohol. I was rushing to leave my girl's house because her parents were coming back earlier than expected, and I got lost, sir." The officer picked up right away that it was one of those nights, a booty call interrupted by returning parents, and me hauling ass out of there. He smiled and said something along the lines of, "What it's like to be 18 again," then gave me directions back to my town with a big grin on his face the whole time. Story 8. I was pulled over just the other day. I even had to join Reddit to share this. I was driving a friend back to her place in Virginia and was going 47 in a 35 zone. I saw the officer make a U-turn and start tailing me for a while. He finally pulled me over after following me for about 1.5 miles. He came to my window and asked if I knew I was speeding. Without directly admitting it, I said I might have been, due to the rolling hills, mentioning that I noticed I was going the speed limit up the hill, so I probably picked up too much speed on the downhill when I passed him. He asked for my license and registration, which I handed over. Then he asked if I had any weapons or drugs in the car. I said no, but then remembered I had some bullets lying around somewhere from a recent trip to Michigan over Thanksgiving, where I'd been shooting. I figured it was better to mention it than have him find them and think something suspicious. He paused and looked at me like he was intrigued, then handed back my registration. He looked at my license, then returned it with a warning. I looked over at my lady friend, and she was staring at me like, "Who are you?" I was dumbfounded by what had just happened, but I drove off looking like a total boss. Now my friend thinks I'm some kind of smooth-talking criminal. Story 9. This story has 2 parts. I was pulled over for having expired plates. When asked for my proof of insurance, I realized I didn't have the updated card with me. It was at home. I got 2 tickets and later showed up in court to fight the no insurance charge. I did have insurance, I just couldn't prove it at the time. Fast forward 5 months. I'm driving home late at night after work. I'm going 60 in a 55, so a cop pulls me over. He asks how old I am. Pretty sure he was checking for kids breaking curfew, and I show him my ID. Then he asks for my proof of insurance. Guess who forgot the card again? So I start tearing through my car's console, searching for it. It wasn't there. As I'm digging through all the papers, I pull out my old citation, the one from before, and it shows that I had insurance at the time. The cop asks to see it. I hand it to him and explain that I got that ticket for not having the card with me, even though I was insured. He looks it over, gives me a pitiful look, and and says, "Just head home and make sure you have your proof of insurance on you next time." Then he drives off. Story 10. Along with most of this thread, not a cop, but back in college, I was driving from Wisconsin to Boston and back to Wisconsin over a long weekend. I was supposed to be at work by 3 p.m. on Monday. It was 5 p.m. on Monday, and I was still 2 states away, Indiana. I was in a 1986 Toyota Tercel hatchback, whose speedometer only went up to about 85, and I just said, "Fuck it." When the cop pulled me over, he asked how fast I was going. I told him I honestly didn't know, because I didn't. I had buried the needle. He asked, "Where are you coming from?" "Boston," I said. He asked, "Where are you going?" "Wisconsin." "Then, why were you going so fast?" "I want to get home," I said, completely deadpan. He asked if either I or my friend had a credit card. We didn't. He asked the same question several times. Eventually, I asked how fast I was going. He replied, "I clocked you doing 103. You must have had that thing floored." I didn't tell him I still had about an inch left before the pedal was all the way down. He had me get out of the car and come back to the cruiser, still asking about a credit card. I finally asked why he was so insistent, and he explained that Wisconsin was a non-extradition state, so if I skipped out on the ticket, they couldn't issue a warrant for my arrest in Indiana. After a few minutes, he handed me back my license and registration and said, "I'm going to give you a warning on this one. Slow it down. It's starting to rain." I was too flabbergasted to even thank him. Story 11. My stepbrother loves his weed. He was getting ready for a party and had rolled a few of what he calls Marley joints, basically just really large, overstuffed joints, to bring with him. So he's driving to the party and sitting at a red light when he looks over and sees a cop car next to him, with the passenger seat officer staring right at him. My stepbrother gives a friendly nod and waits for the light. The passenger cop suddenly bursts out laughing and taps the driving officer. Now both of them are staring at him and laughing their asses off. My stepbrother, already high, is trying to figure out what they're looking at, but decides to just stay friendly and laugh along with them. So there he is, nervously laughing while the cops are cracking up. He doesn't want to stop laughing in case that makes him look suspicious, and he doesn't want to break eye contact because that would make me look guilty. So he just keeps laughing and holding eye contact for what he says felt like 30 seconds, until the light turns green. As he pulls away, the cop car pulls in behind him and follows him for a few blocks before turning off and leaving him alone. He gets to the party and starts telling everyone about the weird encounter. That's when his friend says he knows exactly why the cops were laughing. Turns out, my stepbrother had 2 Marley joints tucked behind his left ear, clearly visible to the cops the whole time. Story 12. Not a cop. Back in 2002, I was riding my motorcycle home from work, a 1987 Yamaha FJ1200. Very fast compared to most modern cars, though not as quick as modern crotch rockets. I was on a 4-lane highway with stoplights around 9:30 p.m. I turned left onto the highway, and temptation got the better of me. I ripped through the gears, zinged it up to 3rd, and backed off when I saw 105 on the speedo. I rode another mile at normal speed, then took a cloverleaf onto the interstate. About half a mile down the interstate, I noticed a car rapidly approaching from behind. I moved into the right lane, and sure enough, he pulled in behind me and lit me up. I pulled over. The officer got out, told me to turn off the bike and take off my helmet, standing there with his arms crossed and looking very annoyed. I complied. He said, "Good thing you stopped. I had a state trooper waiting on the on-ramp a mile ahead in case you tried to run. I see what you're riding, and I know what it is. You're not a young dipshit, so I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt and not ask if you know why I pulled you over. You were speeding, and you know you were speeding. What I'm going to ask is, how fast were you going? Be honest, it'll make a difference." I immediately replied, "I backed off when I saw 105. He said, "Good answer. I clocked you at 101. Since you're not trying to screw with me, I'll give you a choice. Do you want a nice, expensive ticket or a serious ass chewing?" I said, "Officer, my ego and my wallet are very small right now. I'll take the ass chewing, please." And boy, did he let me have it. He even threw in, "I have one of these things too, and when you do stupid shit like that, you make all the rest of us look bad." But then he let me go with just a verbal warning. The worst violation he actually wrote up was 80 and a 55, but he marked it as 71 and a 55 just to keep me in the lowest fine bracket. That was in 2005, and even then, it was still $159. Story 13. I'm not an officer, but I got an excuse from an officer. I was doing 50 in a 35, not paying attention. I realized I was going way over and started slowing down. But just as I was doing that, I passed a subdivision, and a cop nailed me before I could fully reduce my speed. He was in a great hiding spot, I've got to admit. He walked up to the window with who I assumed was a ride-along. A girl, and a very pretty one at that. He came to the window and asked, "Do you know why I pulled you over?" I was completely honest and said, "Yes, I was doing 50 in a 35, and you caught me before I caught myself. I apologize." He took my license and registration and went back to his car. I sat there for about 5 minutes, fully expecting a ticket and already mentally preparing to own up and pay for it. Then he comes back, with the girl behind him, and says, "I'm letting you off with a warning this time. I should be writing you a ticket right now, but because my daughter thinks you're cute, I'm letting you off the hook on one condition." Then he gestures for her to come closer to the window. She says, "Would you mind taking me to prom?" At this point, I'm thinking this has to be some kind of bizarre joke, but I go along with it, especially since, I'm getting out of a ticket. I said, "Absolutely. Here's my phone number. Call or text me with the date and time, and let me know the color of your dress so I can match. I'll come pick you up." The officer smiled, said, "Have a good day and drive safe," and sent me on my way. Story 14. Well, I can tell anyone looking to get out of a ticket what not to do, because I definitely did it wrong. About 10 years ago, I was driving home on the Ohio Turnpike after a week of working out of town. It was a foggy and wintry Friday night, and I pretty much had the road to myself. I normally don't speed, but I was getting tired. I had gotten on the road late and was honestly about to give up on making it home and just get a hotel. I crested a small hill and realized I was speeding at the exact same moment I noticed a cop sitting in one of those little cutouts in the middle of the road. He pulled me over and asked where I was going, what I was doing, etc. I was very apologetic and told him I was actually about to pull off and find a hotel because I'd started to feel drowsy since the last exit. I think he was about to let me off with a warning until he said, "I clocked you going 85. And I, stupidly, responded with, "That sounds about right." He proceeded to write the ticket. Looking back, I think if I'd just said, I was focusing so much on the road I honestly didn't realize I was going that fast, he might have let me off with a warning. I don't have any hard feelings about the ticket. I deserved it. Story 15. I've had several over the years, but I don't remember many. Here are a few, mediocre at best, that I do recall. I work as a deputy sheriff, and in years past, our vehicles were white and red. We had a van that we used for select assignments. While driving the van, I attempted to stop a male driver who was talking on his phone. He merged into the right lane and just kept talking. It took me a bit, but I eventually got him to stop. When I asked why he hadn't pulled over and kept talking on the phone, he told me he thought I was an ambulance. I assured him I wasn't, and gave him a ticket just so he'd be sure. If you're distracted enough while on the phone that you don't realize I'm trying to pull you over, or that I'm clearly not an ambulance, you deserve the ticket. On a separate occasion, I stopped a woman for talking on her phone while driving. When I walked up to her window, she was already starting to sob and slowly becoming hysterical. She told me she was having a terrible day and that it just kept getting worse. I asked her what had made it so terrible, and she said, "I just found out my daughter needs braces," and then began crying hysterically. I can only imagine the look on my face. I wrote her the ticket because, seriously, I handed it to her, and she immediately stopped crying, said nothing, and drove off into the sunset or down the highway. That part's a little fuzzy. One thing I can almost say for certain is this. When a driver starts crying, usually female, or tries to flirt, also usually female, I almost always write the ticket. And those behaviors usually stop the moment the ticket is handed over. I don't appreciate the nonsense. Be honest, be apologetic, be respectful, and you'll probably be on your way with just a warning. Story 16. After the first date I had with my girlfriend, I was absolutely buzzing. The night had been amazing. We had great conversation, and it ended with a really great goodnight kiss. I was speeding back to my place after dropping her off and flew right past a cop. I was probably doing 50 miles per hour in a 30. After being pulled over, I explained to the female officer how well the date had gone and why I was so excited. She looked me in the eyes, seemed to take pity on me, and let me off with just a warning. That was the only time I've ever gotten out of a speeding ticket. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, activate the notification bell, and share a similar story or anything you'd like to say in the comments. See you next time.